Hi everyone, this is Anthony O'Flynn. Another day in paradise, coming to you live from the Sunshine Coast. I'm in my neighbourhood of Cotton Tree right now. Most of the businesses closing up for the day. People coming back from the beach. A few joggers around. People enjoying beautiful spring weather. It's one of my favourite times of the whole year, actually, the spring. It's just magic. Not too hot, not too cold, just perfect for me. Another busy day getting ready, everything ready for Paradigm Shift 2020. Also did an interview that will be available tomorrow. I'll post that when it comes available. A few things to share in this video. Well, if there was any greater evidence that the institutions are under pressure here in Australia, we're seeing not one but two votes of no confidence motions raised in two separate parliaments in 1 week, which is, as far as I know, that's unprecedented alone in itself. Of course, the vote of no confidence in Victoria against the Daniel Andrews Labor government was unsuccessful, as expected, as was the vote of no confidence against Gladys. Many thought she was going down, at least not politically. This is really significant because it is a sign and it's a reflection of the institutions that are a huge part of our society are under now continual and constant pressure. And this is not going away. This is simply going to intensify for a number of reasons. Firstly, for the astrological reasons that Pluto, which is the transpersonal planet, and its effect of putting all the institutions that are necessary, they're like the building blocks of our society, under pressure. So it's this transformation because it's in Capricorn. Capricorn's this sign of everything that is to do with the institutions, respectability, and Pluto has the power of a tsunami but moves at the speed of a glacier. And that's why it's a long, slow process. So Pluto in 2023 will move into Aquarius briefly, then will retrograde, go back into Capricorn, and then finally stay in Aquarius in 2024. This will have huge impact on the collective because, as I said, Pluto is a transpersonal planet. So what you're seeing now is at least partly due to the action of Capricorn in Pluto. And by that I'm talking about the government, the financial institutions, the financial system, the medical system, the educational system, all these sort of building blocks that govern or rule us that are intrinsic and necessary, but their dysfunction is being revealed, their shortcomings are being revealed, and the imperfections are being revealed. And to think that we've had these events just this week in Australia at the state level, it's quite amazing. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the state election October 31st here in Queensland. Vote Labor last, by the way. We don't want Anastasia Palaszczuk anywhere near having the power to implement all these dysfunctional policies, destructive, reckless policies, using the closing of borders for political gain, huge debt that's been racked up, and just basically the dysfunction that she's brought with bad government, poor leadership, terrible discernment. Queensland, by the way, has the highest unemployment of any state in Australia. That was before COVID. vote Labor last. Meanwhile, we see the pressure on Daniel Andrews' leadership in Victoria intensify. It's quite interesting to watch Murdoch and LNP attack dog Peter Credlin really go toe to toe with him today. Greatest cracks in his cold composure that I've seen yet publicly, and his leadership is in terminal decline, that's for sure. And wow, what to say about him. The inability to actually just take any accountability for mistakes, errors, indisputable facts that he somehow tries to twist. It's completely ridiculous, even diminishing the role of Premier itself actually. And as I've made in previous forecasts, this will have a colossal impact on the entire ALP, the Labor Party at both the state and federal level. And this is basically because of a much broader process that we're undergoing at a planetary level, and it's because of the function of the light, which I was actually talking about in this interview today, that this is actually starting to occur, because we're now moving away from this Kali Yuga, this epoch of darkness, this Iron Age, into the Age of Truth, Satya Yuga, the Age of Light. And the light is destabilizing the darkness at this point. And this is showing up by revealing all the dysfunction of governments, of leaders, of systems, of all the things that we're seeing coming to light more and more each day. And this is not going to go away, it's actually only going to intensify. And meanwhile, the entire narrative of COVID-19 is really, falling apart in real time, day by day. The World Health Organization have just come out and said stop using lockdowns as your primary control method. So they've basically backflipped on what they're trying to implement as this totalitarian agenda under the regime of medical mafia. That's a huge statement. So by what logic or policy are you actually then implementing a lockdown in Victoria? By what science? By what evidence? It's a complete farce. There was a Roy Morgan poll that actually revealed that in Victoria, 73% of people believe you should be able to visit your family, which is great. But it's also extremely disturbing that over 25% of people in that survey actually believe that you shouldn't be able to visit your family in Melbourne. What sort of a society have we become? It's just bizarre. Not only that, 72% of people believe that the 5 kilometre rule should also be scrapped, which is great. All these metrics have gone up, by the way, compared to the last poll. So the support for the lockdowns, the control, the oppression, the tyranny is really waning in Melbourne and Victoria. But again, what's disturbing is that over 25% of people still think that you shouldn't be able to travel more than 5 kilometres from your home. It's quite frankly bizarre, and that's bizarre for the following metrics and statistics. That if you're infected with COVID, the survival rate, if you are 0 to 19, is 99.997%. If you are 20 to 49, the survival rate is 99.98%. If you are 50 to 69, 99.5%. And if you are 70 plus, that's 94.6%. So the CDC has, in their own statistics, stated that the chance of not dying from COVID is 99.96%. it's just incredible. And the hysteria, the tyranny, the government overreach, the alarmism, the biggest failing of public policy in the history of Australia is what we're actually seeing taking place in Melbourne, in Victoria. And yet it continues with the extension of the state of emergency until November. It's absolutely mind-boggling, isn't it? Until November 8. And if you're not aware of this and you're watching around the world, the people in Melbourne have been in lockdown since July. This has been going on for 14 weeks now. And as far as I'm concerned, perhaps if you live in other parts of the world, or definitely other parts of Australia, you don't think that's concerning because it doesn't affect you. That is a extremely limited and self-centered view of looking at what other Australians are going through, and don't think that that can't come to wherever you are. I mean, if they're doing this in Melbourne, what makes you think that they're not going to do it where you are? Because what, we're different in Queensland? Well, time will tell, and I hope it never goes anywhere else in the world. But the reality is this is actually occurring in Melbourne, and I have the deepest compassion for the Melbourne people. But what you need to understand is that you guys are doing a great job for putting political pressure on your your politicians, on the MPs, to hold them accountable and to start to question their mandate, question their policies, and to basically question the official narrative of COVID-19. Those statistics of that poll that I just read out actually really confirm that. And it's really starting to be clear that it's becoming more and more contentious and more question. The norm is changing. The tide is turning now, and it's really important that you maintain the momentum that's already been created, because no one is coming to save you guys. Scotty from marketing has proven to be the worst Prime Minister this great country's ever had, and he's not doing anything to basically try to remove this tyranny in Victoria. There's going to be no support from the armed forces in the sense of removing this tyranny. There's no one coming to save you. There's no aliens coming to save you. There's no ETs coming to save you. There's no Donald Trump coming to save you. There's no psyop, fantasy, disinfo, Q coming to save you, which is the latest psyop that people are really buying into. Sorry if you're a Q supporter. I'd gladly be wrong about that. Not even the Queensland Massive is coming to save you guys. It's really up to you, and it's going to be a long process. I mean, the next election in Victoria is not until 2022, but I do think that there are signs now that things are going to be changing, and changing quite quickly. But it's really a question of organising yourselves in lobby groups and applying political pressure, because this is the most effective way of getting things done. And I am aware that the Greens and the Independents actually voted to keep the 5K rule in the Parliament, which is extremely disappointing. But there it is. That's long been the solution that many have advocated for, the breaking up the two-party control, the left-right wing of the same bird. And the independents have always been the solution to that, at least in the short term. And yet then they've gone and voted for this continuation of the 5-kilometre rule, and also the omnibus law has been passed also in Melbourne, even though it's been amended. And again, it's very disappointing, but this is the situation that's transpiring here in Australia. So basically we're at 904 deaths in Australia of COVID, only 6 here in Queensland, and yet this whole policy around this has completely ruined so many people's lives, shut down businesses, suicides, mental health problems, divorces, and it's been really revealing just how cold and callous the politicisation of the border closure really has been. Meanwhile, Scotty from marketing doesn't even have to do 2 weeks of quarantine and can campaign in Queensland for LNP. Just completely ridiculous. So much hypocrisy, it's beyond belief. Yet in Australia in 2017, 4,269 people died of influenza alone in just 2017. So really those statistics speak for themselves. Currently, there are 191 active cases of COVID in Victoria. There's 196 in New South Wales. And yet there's this kind of complete lockdown, completely contradictory public policy, removing people's freedoms, taking away the right for people to open their business, earn a living. It's just an absolute disgrace. There's only one person in ICU in New South Wales and currently 0 people in an intensive care unit with COVID in Victoria. So it's quite mind-boggling that actually this is still going on now. However, at a broader level, this is actually gaining momentum, gaining support for massive parliamentary reform, massive reformation of our institutions, of our political process, of the political parties themselves, and of course the accountability for the politicians. This is all changing in real time, actually. It's absolutely fantastic to be here. I'm so inspired that people in Australia are starting to wake up, take action, get engaged in the political process, and this will continue and strengthen across this decade, because the reality is that the subtle world, the astral world of this planet is changing, and the truth vibrations that are coming now are a reflection of the changing of the subtle world. And this is going to be something that will intensify and strengthen in many different aspects of our lives moving through this decade. And it's dislodging these systems, it's dislodging the systems that have decayed, that are dysfunctional, that basically are not going to have a place in the new paradigm. And that's because there is this fundamental transformation of human consciousness that is occurring. For some, it is occurring slower than others. For others, it's occurring very quickly. We're seeing 2020 as basically a litmus test for this. Some people you can see are really starting to engage in the awakening process at many different levels. Other people just beginning to see what I call the lower levels of the awakening. That is the revelations behind the power structure, the way that the fabric of society is created, structured, managed and controlled. And many of these topics around that. But really what we're talking about here is a fundamental shift in human consciousness, which will really be so fascinating and exciting to actually be a part of. It's already started, we're well into that process, but my feeling is that the subtle world is even changing rapidly even this month. And this means that there is a greater access to the faster, higher frequencies of consciousness, which spontaneously energize and activate the upper chakras, which basically means that we are becoming more awakened truly and genuinely at a spiritual level. And this in turn is accelerating the evolution of our soul. So this means that here in Australia this year in 2020, we've seen an incredible call to action by so many souls who are finding their voice, hearing the call. And to me, it's very clear that the life purpose of so many people is now actually starting to crystallize in a way that I haven't seen yet, that it's like a certain catalyst, a certain awakening, and everyone is having their own mission, their own calling, their own path, which is the beauty of it. And if you are watching this and you connect with that, then the best way to really go through this process is really tune into this inner world, into the silence, into the stillness, and really listen to your heart, to the calling of your soul, and follow that, even if it doesn't make any sense to the mind. And that's one of the fundamental things of the paradigm shift. One of the fundamental aspects is to be more heart-based. And most people initially interpret that to be more loving, to be more compassionate, to be of service, to be selfless, to be more forgiving, all these beautiful qualities. But that's really only just the beginning in some ways, because this transformation of moving from the head to the heart is one of the defining aspects of the global paradigm shift. And it means living a life that is heart-centered from the perspective that our actions, our career, our friendships, our relationships, where we want to live, what we want to do with our life day to day is much more guided by our heart than our mind. And this power of the human heart is something that is going to completely dominate, particularly the following decade, 2030 to 2040, when people really start to see that so much of our consciousness, our motivations, our actions is really dominated by our head. Now, that's not to dismiss the mind, the brain. It's a very useful tool. But unfortunately, we're at the end of the spectrum now, particularly with all the mental health issues that are popping up in 2020, where people are really realizing that the head is it can be a prison, and many people are really caught in this head-centric way of living. So it's really empowering to see that many people are actually feeling the call of their heart and the call of their soul, even if they're not aware of it yet, because you can see that for so many people it's like their whole destiny's taken like a left turn or a right turn, whatever. It's just an analogy to start to feel that call. And that call is so fulfilling, so rewarding, because it brings so much contentment, and it dismantles the expectations that everybody else has of your life and how you should live it and what you should do with it and everything. And that's really the transition to 5D right there, to be more self-sustaining. And in this world where so many people are seeking external validation, this is the prison of 3D. And expect all the challenges and the transformations to intensify as we're moving forward. We're in the eye of the storm now, and the storm is actually only going to intensify. We are not out of the woods yet, not even close to it. But as the subtle reality shifts, so too will the physical world. It will follow. It's a time lag, it's a delay. But this is a really exciting time to be here, and try to tune into what you feel you're called to do, honor that call, and celebrate that calling in whatever that means to you. Thanks for watching. We live in epic times.